Happy Monday, and welcome back to the Lorden Arts channel. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here today. Case Cracked is the show where we look into a mystery, and what are the critical pieces that help solve that mystery. Today's case is called The One Clue. 61-year-old Carol Bonnet lived alone, and he had no family that lived nearby. But for years, he worked at Clarkson Hospital in Omaha, Nebraska, and had made a few good friends. On October 17, 1978, one of those friends began to worry. The last time he had seen Carol was 2 days before, and he knew the man had no roommate, so he decided to call the manager of the apartment complex and request a welfare check. When the manager received no response at the front door, he bent down and looked through the mail slot. He could see Carol lying face down on the floor. With no key to enter the apartment, the Omaha Fire Department was called first. They broke through the door and found Carol naked, lying on the floor with a stab wound to his torso. He appeared to have been deceased for a few days. When police arrived, they could tell that the apartment had been ransacked and showed signs of a struggle. The apartment manager was questioned. He stated that he had seen no one suspicious near Carol's apartment and that he was usually a clean, tidy person and would have never left his home in such a mess. Once the scene was secure, investigators found several pieces of evidence. There were latent fingerprints and palm prints in Carol's bathroom that they theorized must have come from the killer as they tried to clean themselves. The 3 towels the person used to dry themselves were found in the living room next to Carol, and those towels included some hair. They found more finger and palm prints on beer cans in the trash can and in the kitchen sink, also on the coffee table and the telephone, the cord of which had been cut. They also collected newspapers and some cigarette butts they found. But one piece of evidence stood out far more than all the others. A note was found near Carol. It read, "I am leaving this crime with only one clue. Find it yourself, pig. Die, pig." And it was signed Helter. Investigators had a lot to process and were confused by the focus and message of the note. What was the one clue the writer had referred to? They went outside to process Carol's 1964 green Buick Wildcat, but found that it was no longer at the apartment complex. They listed it as stolen. When neighbors and people at his work were questioned, investigators learned that 2 men had lived with Carol for a short time, but left some time before his death. One of those men still had a key to the Wildcat. Both men were found and questioned, and then released. No connection to the murder could be found. On the 19th, police in Cicero, Illinois, contacted Omaha police. They had found the Wildcat, wrecked, blocking an alley in town, with its motor still running and the lights still on. It also had a license plate from Illinois, which had been reported stolen a day before the murder. From the car, they were able to collect more cigarette butts and 2 additional fingerprints. One belonged to Carol, but the other could not be identified. In the following months, investigators were at a standstill on the case. They couldn't place the unknown prints in local or state databases, and they still didn't know what that special clue was left back at the scene. Carol's case would go cold for 30 years. Then, in December of 2008, Omaha Police's Cold Case Squad received a fax from the Criminal Laboratory Services section of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, or FDLE. They wanted to know if the latent prints from the 1978 murder had been matched to a suspect. No, they replied. The case was still unsolved, and no match had been found in the original investigation. Omaha talked to their cold case squad and asked them to have the prints run through a system called IAFIAS. IAFIAS was launched by the FBI in 1999 and was designed to store and allow state, local, and federal agencies to view each other's crime scene fingerprints. States have their own automated fingerprint identification system, and that's connected up to the FBI's Integrated Automated Fingerprint Identification System, or IAFIS. On December 19th, a crime scene tech at the Omaha Police Department named Laura Casey started searching IAFIS for a match. Less than 5 hours later, the system had returned possible matches for comparison. In March of 2009, the cold case unit asked Laura to more closely compare the IAFIS prints to the latent prints from their murder scene. For several days, Laura focused in and compared print after print until she found the correct match. It came back to a man named Jerry Watson. Watson was in prison at that time in Illinois, where he was serving time for burglary. Jerry Watson grew up in Cicero, Illinois, and had quite a record. In the 1970s, he was sentenced to 30 years in prison in Mississippi on sexual assault charges, the records of which were destroyed in Hurricane Katrina. From there, he moved state to state using different aliases. He lived in Mississippi in 1977 before going to Nebraska to visit a relative in the fall of 1978 at the same time that Carol was killed. After that, he lived in Florida in 1979 under another alias. Investigators were confident that they had the right man, but they needed to hurry, as Watson was scheduled for release in only a few days. The biometric evidence was strong, but more was needed to make an arrest and bring charges against Watson. With a warrant in hand, investigators traveled to Lawrence Correctional Center in Illinois to question Watson and obtain fingerprints, palm prints, and DNA samples. When questioned, Watson confirmed that he was in Omaha in 1978, but said that he didn't know Carol and he had not committed the murder. Quote, "I know that you can't have evidence that said I did it, because I know I didn't do that." Before they left, all samples were collected from their suspect. It was now time to analyze his DNA. Technicians collected DNA samples from the original evidence to compare the new samples to. They were able to obtain both full and partial samples, and those samples matched Watson. Along with the prints that were matched with IAFIS, one of the original palm prints were matched. DNA taken from the cigarette butts in the car and in the apartment were matched, and the hair on the towels were matched to Watson as well. But what about that one clue that investigators missed? While going through all the original evidence, a Thrifty Nickel advertisement was found in a newspaper that was sitting near Carol's body. In one corner, there was a blue scribble that looked like writing had been covered in ink. When examined closely, investigators could make out Jerry W. written in cursive handwriting. After more than 30 years, investigators were finally ready to charge Watson. On November 15, 2010, Jerry Watson was charged. At his trial in August of 2011, Watson's defense argued that police reports stated that Carol liked to frequent local bars. He would buy men drinks and then take them back to his apartment. Sometimes the men stayed with him for a while, and he would also let them use his car. They said other suspects should have been considered more closely. They also stated that the two other suspects from the original investigation had access to the apartment and car, and Watson's DNA could have been left when Watson was with one of them, and Carol wasn't even home. After 10 days of testimony and presenting evidence, the jury retired for deliberation. Only a few hours later, they came back with their verdict. Watson was guilty of first-degree murder and possession of a deadly weapon to commit a felony. 33 years to the day of the murder, on October 17, 2011, Jerry Watson was sentenced to life in prison. He also received 10 to 20 years for use of a deadly weapon to commit a felony. In the years that followed, Watson would use all of his appeals and make it all the way to the Nebraska Supreme Court. Each time, he claimed that there was insufficient evidence for his conviction. After more than 30 years, some of the original witnesses were now dead, and because of this, he was unable to confront their testimony. The Supreme Court upheld the original conviction, stating that there was sufficient evidence. He still sits in prison today. Case cracked. We would like to thank FBI.gov, Officer.com, CaseLaw.com, EvidenceMagazine.com, and the Lexington Clipper Herald. Of course, the biggest thank you goes to Christy Arnhart for researching and writing up today's case, and here she is to discuss it with us now. Christy, first question, because I've never seen something like this come up before. This is the first time I've heard of an apartment manager not having a key
I,
it was literally that they didn't have a key?
yeah, they didn't have a key.
Like, I get if they were saying that they had a key, but there was like a deadbolt or, like those chains, the
Hmm.
chain door guards on them. But that's not
Yeah.
what happened in this case. They didn't have a key.
No.
Wow.
And I don't
Wow.
know if he might have changed the lock when he moved in. I know a lot of people will do that. If your landlord doesn't have to get in, they don't know.
Yeah, yeah. And we didn't. Do you have any sense of like, was this a multi-unit apartment structure or is
Yes.
this okay? Okay. Wow. Yeah, that's still kind of weird though. I've just never
Hmm.
heard of that before. But regardless, we know they do break down the door and they get in there.
Yeah. Yeah, they will.
So fingerprints and latent prints, obviously a very big focus in terms of this case. But there was one print we talked about and it didn't really kind of come back at the end. What about the print in the car? Now, the location seems to make sense because we know that Jerry lived in Cicero at some point and,
Mhm.
effectively that's where the car winds up. But what about the print? Did the print wind up matching him?
Nope.
Mm.
It's still unidentified as far as I know.
Wow. Wow. I mean, think about how many people you have in your vehicle. I've always wondered about that with these cases about like, oh, they're looking for prints in a car. It's like, well, if you've got a lot of friends, I mean, all their prints are going to be in there. But I guess you collect up those and then exclude them as you're going. But it's just no match to that print at all, huh?
No, and it was like that in the house too. They had some prints they couldn't match to anybody, but they didn't have Jared's. Or they did. They had the latents, but I don't know. He was just good at covering his tracks, I think.
Yeah, yeah, maybe that's really weird. Now we frequently hear the term latent prints. Can you tell us a little
Mhm.
bit more about that? What is that exactly?
Yes, the FBI tells us that latent prints are impressions that are usually left at crime scenes and they're not usually visible to the naked eye. Your fingertips, your palms, the soles of your feet, all of those will leave latent prints. Do you know the FBI gets 700, about 700 requests a day for latent print searches?
Wow.
I
Wow.
mean, 700.
Yeah, yeah. But in a country where it's so easy to move from state to state effectively, and
Mm.
you've got the law enforcement divisions all working kind of in their silos when it comes to their information, the first thing I'd think of too would be like, well, run that to the FBI and see if they've got this matched up anywhere. So
Oh, yeah.
kind of cool to hear about that system where they're effectively trying to do that automatically, get all those systems linked up, and then you can search it that way. Not to mention that fielding those requests, if you've got 700 of them coming your way daily, yeah, you want to make a self-service option for that somehow.
Oh, yeah.
But it also sounds like, because it's not just about fingerprints at this point, we're talking about palm prints and possibly impressions from your feet as well. So it
Hmm.
sounds like we got to start fingerprinting, palm printing, and foot printing all of our known criminals.
It does. It really does. Just do some kind of full body print. Oh, several years ago, the FBI actually did start working toward that. They created a system called NPPS, which is the National Palm Print System. Now, NPPS is a centralized repository of known palm prints within the FBI's databases. And this allows searches of unknown palm prints against that. Or if you have a known palm print, you can also search it against the unsolved latent file.
Hmm.
So they're working toward that in some capacity.
Yeah, that's a cool aspect to it too, because we have heard before, at least in terms of DNA matches. I don't know if I've heard about it with fingerprint matches necessarily, but where they will say, "Oh, we know that this is tied to another suspect, but we just don't know who the suspect is." We've got
Mhm.
these effectively these profiles at two different locations of two different crime scenes. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is.
I understand that this case also seems to hold a special distinction or a special honor for the FBI.
Yes, every year the FBI has something that they call the Hit of the Year. Each year, the FBI's Criminal Justice Information Services Division selects a latent hit of the year, and then they tell the public about the case, how it was solved, kind of cluing us in. And this made one in 2012, I think it was. I
Awesome.
could be wrong on the date, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, Agent Casey certainly deserves it. She did some good work to pull all that together.
Yes, she did.
Christy, thank you so much for helping us on today's story. We appreciate you, and I've got some other people to thank right now. Thank you, PayPal supporters James Reed, Lois Trail, Jennifer Wilson, and a special thank you to Ana Manjares. If you'd like to support the channel, please visit lordandarts.com. There you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, buy merchandise, or even buy us a coffee like Jamie Hollenden recently did. We know that learning about the mechanisms that help support and find justice in these cases is important to understand the many unsolved cases we also cover, and we really appreciate your support in allowing us to continue doing that. Remember, you can get another Lord and Art story every week on the Seriously Mysterious podcast. A new episode is coming tomorrow and every Tuesday after that. Visit seriouslymysterious.com and remember to subscribe on your favorite podcatchers. Please also don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon below if you'd like to catch one of our weekly Secret Studio live shows. And of course, I'll be back with a new Unsolved Mystery for you on Friday, right here on the Lord and Arts channel.